Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk to you about a powerful principle of practice that can set you free and bring peace into your life, forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again as a forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again as a healing process. It's not about pretending that the hurt didn't happen or that everything is just fine. No, it's much deeper than that. Forgiveness is the key to healing your own heart. And sometimes that healing requires us to let go of things in a way that doesn't require confrontation or even explanation. There is a profound healing that takes place when we choose to forgive someone, not to restore the relationship necessarily, but to restore our own peace. Holding on to anger, resentment, or bitterness is like carrying a heavy weight every single day. It affects your thoughts, your actions, your emotional state, and even your physical health. It eats away at you piece by piece, and it keeps you stuck in a cycle of pain. When you forgive in silence, you are choosing to let go of that weight. You are choosing to release the negative emotions that have been holding you hostage and instead make space for peace, joy, and healing. It's not about them, it's about you and your well-being. Sometimes when we're hurt, we feel like we need to address the person who hurt us. We want them to know what they did, to feel the pain they caused, but in reality, seeking that kind of closure often does more harm than good. It may stir up even more hurt or prolong the negative emotions you've been carrying. Forgiving in silence doesn't require any of that. You don't have to explain yourself, demand an apology, or even have a conversation. The process is about releasing the emotional hold that person has on you. When you choose to forgive in silence, you don't give them the power over your emotional state anymore. The power is in your hands now. You don't need them to acknowledge your pain because your healing doesn't depend on them. It depends on your decision to let go of what's been weighing you down. It's a quiet act of reclaiming your peace. You forgive because you understand that holding on to the hurt only keeps you tethered to a past that can't be changed. Forgiving in silence is often a quiet inner work that takes place over time. You might not feel the shift right away. In fact, there might be moments where the pain still lingers, but each day as you choose to forgive and release the anger, something starts to shift in you. Your heart begins to heal and you feel lighter. You can move forward in your life without the constant reminder of what happened. You are no longer a prisoner of your past. In this healing process, you learn to embrace your own power. You recognize that your peace doesn't depend on anyone else's actions or words. You have the ability to create an inner calm, no matter what others may do or say. This kind of forgiveness is empowering because it shifts the focus from the wrong that was done to you to the strength and resilience you possess to move beyond it. It's the ultimate act of self-love because you are choosing to prioritize your own emotional health over the need for revenge, confrontation, or validation. True healing comes when you release yourself from the past, and forgiving in silence allows you to do just that. You stop carrying the baggage that's been weighing you down, and you free yourself to walk in peace and wholeness. Forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again is a demonstration of strength in silence. It's easy to assume that silence is a sign of weakness or avoidance, but in reality, silence can be one of the most powerful tools for healing and growth. When you choose to forgive someone in silence, you're not avoiding the situation, you're consciously choosing to take the high road and release yourself from the need for validation or confrontation. Silence and forgiveness is not about suppressing your emotions, but rather about giving yourself the space to heal without allowing someone else's actions to continue affecting your peace. We often think that in order to truly forgive, we need to have a conversation, explain our feelings, or demand an apology. We believe that without that exchange, the situation remains unresolved. But forgiveness in silence teaches us that healing doesn't depend on external validation. It doesn't require the other person to acknowledge their wrongdoing or even understand the impact they've had on you. Forgiveness is something that happens within you, and it's not always necessary for that process to involve words or confrontation. By choosing silence, you're taking control of your emotional journey and acknowledging that your peace is more important than any conversation that could happen. Sometimes we feel like we need to give people a piece of our mind to stand up for ourselves or to demand an apology. But in doing so, we often stay tied to the very thing we're trying to let go of. Forgiveness in silence allows us to break free from that cycle of needing to be heard or understood. Instead of engaging in a back and forth where emotions may flare up and the hurt can deepen, we take the quiet path of releasing that energy and letting it go. There's strength in walking away without a word because it shows that you have the emotional maturity to rise above the situation and prioritize your well-being. In many cases, silence is more than just a peaceful resolution, it's also a form of protection. When we engage with someone who has hurt us, we often open ourselves up to further emotional harm. There is wisdom in choosing silence because it protects our hearts from further damage. By forgiving quietly, you avoid reopening old wounds or being drawn back into an unhealthy dynamic. Your silence becomes a shield that safeguards your mental and emotional. The strength found in silence also comes from the power to move forward without needing to dwell on the past. When you forgive in silence, you take a stand for your own growth. You choose not to remain stuck in the cycle of blame, anger, or regret. Instead, you quietly break free from the chains of bitterness and resentment, allowing yourself the space to heal and thrive. This act of silent strength shows that you are no longer allowing someone else's actions to control your emotional state. You are choosing to release that control and reclaim your peace, all without ever needing to utter a word. By embracing forgiveness in silence, you also demonstrate a quiet confidence in your ability to heal. It is not a sign of defeat or surrender. It is an affirmation that you don't need external validation to move forward. Your ability to forgive quietly speaks volumes about your emotional intelligence and resilience. It's a reminder that the power to heal, to move on, and to embrace peace lies within you, not in someone else's apology or acknowledgement. You have the strength to choose silence, to let go, and to move forward on your own terms. Forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again is an act of emotional freedom. It's a choice that releases you from the toxic grip of past wounds, allowing you to reclaim your life and your peace of mind. Often we become so entangled in the hurt others have caused us that it defines our thoughts and actions, keeping us tethered to a moment in time that no longer serves us. Forgiving in silence is a conscious decision to break free from that emotional imprisonment. It's about choosing to let go of the anger, the resentment, and the frustration, and stepping into a space where you can breathe, heal, and move forward. Emotional freedom begins when you realize that holding on to pain doesn't punish the other person, it punishes you. It traps you in a cycle of hurt that keeps resurfacing every time you think about what was done to you. Every time you replay that hurt, you unknowingly give that person power over you, allowing their actions to dictate your emotional state. When you forgive silently, you break that cycle. You stop giving them the power to dictate your emotions, your peace, or your future. You decide the hurt is no longer going to control you. Sometimes we feel like we need closure. We think that if we could just have a conversation with the person who hurt us, everything would make sense and we could finally move on. But closure doesn't come from others, it comes from within. It comes from your decision to let go of the need for answers, for apologies, or for validation. When you forgive in silence, you don't rely on the other person to provide the closure you seek. You provide it for yourself by choosing to release the emotional weight and step into freedom. This kind of freedom doesn't mean that the hurt never happened or that you're pretending everything is fine. No, it's about making the decision that the pain no longer has a hold on you. You give yourself permission to heal, to forgive, and to move forward. In choosing emotional freedom, you're creating space for new experiences, new relationships, and a future that is no longer defined by the actions of others. Forgiveness in silence is also a powerful way to protect your peace. There are some people whose actions are so toxic that no conversation or explanation will ever change them. Engaging with them, even in an attempt to forgive, can sometimes do more harm than good. In these situations, forgiveness in silence is the healthiest choice. You don't need to engage with them to move on or to release the negative emotions tied to the situation. You simply let go, protect your heart, and allow yourself the freedom to live without the constant weight of their actions hanging over you. By forgiving in silence, you also show yourself compassion. You recognize that you don't need to fight, explain, or prove anything to anyone. You are worthy of peace, and you honor that by giving yourself the freedom to release what no longer serves you. Emotional freedom doesn't come from revenge or confrontation. It comes from understanding that your peace is your responsibility. You have the power to choose how you react to the world around you, and by forgiving in silence, you take back control over your emotions and your future. You stop being a prisoner to someone else's actions and start living for yourself, free from the chains of past pain. Forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again is an act of self-respect. In a world where we are often taught to fight for our relationships, to confront our issues head on, and to demand acknowledgement for our pain, choosing silence as a form of forgiveness may seem counterintuitive. But in reality, there is no greater display of self-respect than deciding to forgive someone without requiring their participation in the process. It's a bold declaration that your emotional health is more important than holding on to the hope of reconciliation or any need for recognition from others. Self-respect is all about setting boundaries, knowing when to stand firm, knowing when to let go, and understanding your worth. When someone hurts you, it's natural to feel the urge to explain yourself, to let them know how much they've hurt you, or to try to make them understand the damage they've caused. However, what often happens in these situations is that the person who hurt you remains indifferent or unwilling to accept responsibility, leaving you emotionally drained and still tied to them in a way that prevents you from moving forward. Forgiving in silence means you no longer feel the need to chase after someone's understanding or acknowledgement. Instead, you honor yourself by creating the space you need to heal without being dependent on the other person's actions or approval. Choosing silence as a form of forgiveness is also a way of communicating to yourself that you are deserving of peace. Sometimes we allow ourselves to be drawn into unnecessary drama or toxic situations because we feel it's our duty to engage, to be heard, or to make things right. But in truth, peace doesn't come from making everyone understand your side or from hashing out every detail of the hurt you've experienced. Peace comes when you decide to let go, to stop reliving the hurt, and to stop looking for someone else to fix it. When you forgive in silence, you are saying to yourself that you no longer need external validation or an impulsion or feel whole again. You are enough, and you have the ability to create peace within yourself without needing anyone else's input. By forgiving in silence, you also protect your energy and your dignity. Sometimes engaging with someone who has hurt you only leads to more frustration, more unresolved issues, and further emotional distress. The constant back and forth or attempts to explain yourself can leave you feeling depleted and unheard. Choosing to forgive and move on in silence shows that you value your time and energy enough to protect them. You no longer waste your emotional resources on a person or situation that doesn't contribute to your well-being. In doing so, you affirm your worthiness of respect, peace, and the freedom to walk away from anything that doesn't nurture your growth. When you forgive in silence, you elevate yourself above the situation. You demonstrate that you don't need the other person to acknowledge their wrongs or to fix the relationship in order for you to heal. Your self-respect is not contingent on someone else's behavior. It's rooted in your own ability to stand firm, set boundaries, and take care of your emotional health. This kind of forgiveness teaches you that your peace is non-negotiable and that you don't need anyone else's approval to move forward with your life. It's a quiet act of asserting your value, showing that you are worthy of love, respect, and peace regardless of how others may treat you. Forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again is a powerful demonstration of choosing grace over grudge. It's easy to hold on to the bitterness, the anger, or the desire for revenge when someone has hurt you, and it can feel like the most justified response. We live in a world that often glorifies getting even, making sure the person who wronged you knows exactly what they've done, or forcing them to feel the pain they caused you. But forgiveness, particularly when done in silence, isn't about excusing their actions or forgetting the hurt. It's about choosing a different path, one where grace takes precedence over the need to hold on to negative emotions. Choosing grace over grudge is an act of empowerment. It is an acknowledgement that the only person whose emotional state you can control is yourself. When you forgive silently, you are essentially choosing not to let the wrongdoer continue to control your emotions. You're deciding that your life, your peace, and your happiness will not be dictated by someone else's mistakes. You release them from the role they've played in your emotional landscape, no longer letting them keep you stuck in a cycle of resentment. The power lies in your hands, and in forgiving without confrontation, you break free from the grip of anger, resentment, or the desire for retribution. It's important to recognize that grace is not something that should be confused with weakness. Forgiving someone without demanding an apology or acknowledgement requires immense inner strength. It requires you to rise above the situation and not let the behavior of others define how you feel or how you move forward. Choosing grace means understanding that everyone is on their own journey and that people may hurt us due to their own limitations, struggles, or brokenness. By forgiving in silence, you choose to honor yourself by not holding on to someone else's mistakes, but instead, you release yourself from the emotional burden of the past and choose to move forward with compassion both for them and for yourself. When you forgive in silence, you're also embracing the understanding that healing is not contingent on the other person's behavior or their willingness to admit their fault. You don't need them to apologize or even acknowledge that they did something wrong in order to heal. You give yourself the gift of peace by choosing to move on, not because you've been given what you feel you deserve, but because you are taking responsibility for your own emotional health. In this sense, grace is a form of self-love. It's about choosing not to let what was done to you control your future or your emotional well-being. Forgiving silently is not about being passive or ignoring the injustice. It's about choosing a higher path that is not defined by bitterness. By choosing grace, you stop reliving the pain and instead move into a space of growth and emotional freedom. Grace doesn't mean you accept bad behavior or allow yourself to be treated poorly. It means that you recognize your value is not diminished by someone else's actions, and you don't need to carry the weight of that wrong any longer. You are free to move forward, to build new relationships, and to embrace a future filled with peace, no longer shackled by the past. Grace is not just something you extend to others, it's something you extend to yourself, giving yourself the freedom to let go and to rise above. Forgiving people in silence and never speaking to them again is about moving forward. It's a powerful, quiet act that allows you to leave behind the hurt, the pain, and the past and step into the future with a renewed sense of peace. Oftentimes we find ourselves stuck in the past, replaying the hurt over and over again, unable to move on because we're waiting for an apology, waiting for someone else to fix what's broken. But when we forgive in silence, we make the conscious decision to stop looking backward. We stop waiting for someone else to change, to apologize, or to make things right. Instead, we decide that our own healing, our own peace, and our own future are worth more than holding on to a past that can't be rewritten. Moving forward means releasing ourselves from the grip of past hurts. When we choose to forgive quietly, we're no longer allowing the wrongdoer to continue to have control over our lives. We stop letting their actions define our emotional state or our future. Holding on to the pain of the past can keep us in a cycle of negativity where our thoughts are constantly focused on the person who hurt us or the event that caused us pain. But forgiveness, particularly in silence, offers us the chance to step out of that cycle. We let go of the emotional baggage that has been weighing us down, and we allow ourselves to look ahead, to embrace new opportunities, and to create a future that isn't limited by past wounds. When you forgive in silence, you are not necessarily forgetting what happened or pretending that it didn't matter. Instead, you are choosing to stop allowing the hurt to dictate your future. You recognize that your life has more to offer than to be stuck in a loop of bitterness and resentment. You free yourself from the emotional anchor that's been keeping you from sailing forward into the possibilities that lie ahead. It's a quiet but profound decision to release the past and embrace the present and future with an open heart. The beauty of forgiveness in silence is that it allows you to move on without needing anyone's permission or approval. You don't need the person who wronged you to understand your pain, and you don't need them to apologize. Your healing is not dependent on their acknowledgement. It's a personal decision, a gift you give yourself. You no longer have to wait for someone else to change in order for you to heal. You are in charge of your own emotional journey, and you have the power to let go of the past and step into a future where you are free from the weight of old wounds. By forgiving in silence, you allow yourself to move forward with peace and clarity. You stop carrying the burden of someone else's wrongs and instead choose to live fully in the present, focusing on your own growth and well-being. Your future becomes less about what happened in the past and more about who you are becoming. This quiet act of forgiveness allows you to embrace new opportunities, new relationships, and new experiences, free from the emotional weight of past hurt. When you make the decision to forgive and move forward, you are opening the door to a brighter, more peaceful future. And that's a future worth walking into. Stay encouraged, friends.